Good afternoon to everyone and welcome to our meeting talking about lean in sales. In this period, talking about forecast is at least a gamble. You know, the pandemic has created a big moment of discontinuity, and making sales forecast today becomes a great question mark. On the other hand, we know that being able to count on accurate forecast allow us to allocate resources and investment in a more productive way. Lean thinking is already widely recognized for improving forecasting in manufacturing, but can also be a great help in sales. Michael Webb, one of most important exponents of lean sales in the world, will help us today to understand how to apply the lean thinking and methodologies also in the field of sales forecasts. With Michael, we'll discover how lean thinking can increase the accuracy and for sales forecast and, in the medium term, spread a scientific culture within sales organization. I introduce myself. I am Marco Meglioli. I have the role of principal in STAUFEN.Italia, and my career in consulting began in 1998. Over the last decade, I've been involved in sales projects in order to support the companies in achieving sustainable results over time, improving the efficiency of commercial and service processes. As Michael suggested, in sales projects, we always start from the value for the customer and his customer journey. A few words about STAUFEN. STAUFEN is a global consulting company. Throughout the STAUFEN network, we implement projects for our customer in all key areas of the world by deploying with local consultants. From 1st July 2019, STAUFEN and JMAC, the leading Japanese lean consulting firm, have combined their experiences and skills to provide more qualified support to companies. The next slide summarizes the leading approach of STAUFEN projects. Companies and their employees are more and more being called upon to respond and adapt to rapid changes, new business models, products, and services offered by competitors. Proactive and customer-oriented behaviors with adequate business structure become necessary because today the reaction alone is not enough. We take into account and consider both aspects, processes and structure on the end, corporate culture and employees on the other. Also today, with our important guest, we will see how much the success of project is based on the simultaneous management of these two variables. Well, before introducing you, Michael Webb, I anticipated that at the end of the interview, Michael will answer the question that you could write in the chat during the interview. Don't lose this opportunity, please. And now, after this brief introduction, it is a great honor and pleasure for me to introduce our guest, Michael Webb. Welcome, Michael, and thank you for accepting our invitation today. I leave you the word.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be back. You reminded me, we started talking together back in 2015. And due to COVID and other things, I mean, it's been a while since we worked together. So I'm really happy to have a chance to work with you again. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Michael, and welcome again. Today we will be talking about improving sales. Please tell our audience about your background.
Sure. Well, I had a math degree in school, and I went out and got a sales job. I sold business forms, and then I sold ERP software and mini computers, and then factory automation and engineering services, and ultimately got into sales training and process improvement. Over the years, sales manager, sales trainer, and process improvement consultant was kind of the career path I took.
Sorry, Michael, if I interrupt you, but I mean, that's an unusual background for someone to get into the lean and continuous improvement, or not?
Yeah, it's kind of unusual. So I grew up in that sales and marketing culture, but I was always interested in how engineering people and manufacturing people how they solved their problems. I actually studied production and inventory control, and I got a certification. And I got a certification as a quality manager also. Learned about Edwards Deming and his idea that a business is like an experiment in the market. And as I learned more about Lean and about Six Sigma, I observed all these really valuable ideas that should be being used in sales and marketing management, but we're not.
Yes, and that's why we are talking today. Michael, first question for you. Our audience consists mainly today of managing directors and sales leaders. The whole system of sales is a big part of their job. Now, you've made some comments to me recently that most B2B sales departments can dramatically improve the forecasting. So let's start there. What do you like to tell us about forecasting?
Well, you've seen how lean thinking has improved forecasting in lots of businesses. So how does that happen? When the forecast is wrong, lean says, go to the Gemba, observe things for yourself, find the cause of the problem, and then make the work itself more consistent and predictable. So forecast accuracy is a consequence of improving the process. So obviously forecasts are critical in any business, any part of the business. And there's plenty of smart, hardworking people, both in manufacturing and in sales and marketing. But unfortunately, sales doesn't have the same success. Inaccurate sales forecasts are normal. Years ago, a company president told me it's like driving your car with mud all over the windshield. It makes decision-making treacherous. And the point I want to make today is it does not have to be that way. That lean brings a mindset that helps sales break through to some dramatic improvements, especially in the sales forecast, which is why it's a great place to start.
Well, this is going to be interesting for me because I am sure all sort of skeptical questions are coming to mind for some people listening now.
Yes, I expect people to be skeptical. So absolutely.
And so I'll ask you to go on, tell us more, please, about this.
All right. So let's start by considering manufacturing and how the forecast is produced there. The illustration is a simple production line. On the diagram, the material is coming in from the lower left. But whether it's an assembly line or a job shop or continuous manufacturing, it doesn't matter. The point is that to produce the output requires input. The right materials, the right machines, the right people, the right skills, and it requires following methods, a certain process in a right sequence. And studying these things reveals the factors that impact the outcomes, things like inventory status and cycle time and quality. Knowing these factors enables a math function, and that way you plug in current data and it projects the result at a particular time in the future.
And does production result become feedback that reveals problems? And I think that solving these problems is very important to them.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And as you know, manufacturing hasn't always been able to predict its results as well as they're expected to do it today. It took decades for manufacturers to figure out how to do that. And Lean helped them get there. And there's plenty to learn from how they did it. Devices now measure various parts of the work. They didn't have those before, right? And we have histories of past performance that help.
And okay, and so if you compare sales to this, what does it look like?
Well, recognize that in manufacturing, we've got this feedback going on between what we forecast and what actually happens, and we learn from that. They locate the causes so that they can make changes to prevent it from happening again. And so when you're comparing sales and manufacturing, let's observe a couple things about manufacturing. The forecast narrows down tons of details. So management only has to pay attention to what it needs to know. Are we on track? Where's the problem, right? Second, most of the forecasting in manufacturing is based on internal issues. I mean, people can only control what is within their control. So that makes sense, right?
Right. That's true. That's true.
Now consider sales. We get leads. Salespeople qualify those leads. They identify sales opportunities. They make proposals and they close the sale. This is a sequence also, and salespeople collect information about their sales opportunities. And then managers review and adjust the list of opportunities and convert those opportunities into scores and apply expected conversion percentages. And that way opportunities are associated with numbers. And now we can apply a formula to project the yield. The approach makes sense as far as it goes, but it overlooks some extremely important things.
Yeah,
For
totally
example,
agree.
all forecasts are based on assumptions, but the assumptions in sales are very different than in manufacturing. For example, we assume that all the information necessary to evaluate opportunities correctly is captured in the CRM system. We assume salespeople are using sound judgment and opinions in deciding what to enter in the CRM. And third, those managers who are making the adjustments, they do it, right, because of specific knowledge of the opportunity, or are they doing it because of general rules and perceptions that they bring with them to their job? And finally, once we see a sales forecast as numbers, we kind of assume that it is based on solid, hard information behind it.
Now we come to the heart of the matter, I think. Aren't you describe a dilemma? Aren't hard data and opinions incompatible?
Well, precisely. The issue of judgment and opinion is crucial. Now, obviously, salespeople are not machines doing tasks. Customers are not material being processed, right? The environment salespeople work in is complex and it's intangible, right? They have to have knowledge of the industry, of market conditions, of the competition. Salespeople have to take into account all sorts of relationships among individuals in their own company, in the customer's company, relationships between companies. And then there's the customer's perception. How much risk do they see? What is the value versus the cost of solving this problem in their minds? How urgent is it? How aligned are they internally? Then there's the sales cycle, the sequence that a salesperson tries to bring customers through, and the sequence that the customers try to go through as they make decisions. And all of that is laced with intuition, insight into politics, what might be motivating people. There's a lot of reading people.
Yeah. You are saying it is complicated, so we need opinions and judgments.
Absolutely.
And yet, opinions and judgment are the problem. Are really the problem?
First, opinions and judgments are absolutely necessary, right? We can't get inside the customer's head with a micrometer to measure a value proposition. Right?
Exactly. Doesn't that mean these things are subjective for you, Michael?
Well, I have to say yes and no. So there's definitely facts in there. Sales people are in the best position to deal with those things. They know the customers, they know what they're struggling with. They want to find new and better ways of working. And they're motivated to believe that they can get customers to act. I mean, great salespeople earn the customer's trust, or they wouldn't be able to do their job. So salespeople are doing their jobs in the best way they can.
Yeah. And yes, we put a lot of value on these kinds of things. It is a part of art of sales.
Right. And we have to respect that art of sales. we also have to consider the hazards of judgments and opinions. For example, each salesperson makes these judgments and forms their opinions according to their own views and their own past experiences. And salespeople, we know, they vary dramatically in their business insight and experience and their motivations. And every human being tends to adopt their own pet perspectives and views that happen almost by habit, right? And the thing is, each one of these things also applies to sales managers. They're every bit as unique as the salespeople are. But this doesn't mean that it's all subjective and customers cannot be understood. What it means is that sales needs a method to understand. And contrary to manufacturing, that sales process has to focus externally. It needs to find evidence and convert it to data. And it has to respect that customers have their own priorities. They have free will.
Yeah.
And salespeople can't control that.
Yes, but so how do we preserve what is good about the judgments and opinions of sales while avoiding this considerable hazard, Michael?
Well, a really good way to think about it is the parable of the blind man and the elephant. So just about everyone in sales and marketing is in the position of the blind man. We know what we've experienced. It's different from what other people have experienced, but when we try to convince other people of our point of view, we miss what they've seen, and likewise for them. In sales, we need a way to integrate these diverse experiences into a sort of a cohesive whole where everyone's observations can be respected, because together we're smarter. Now, opinions are important, but the observation of facts is priceless. So in order to get closer to hard data, as we have in manufacturing, our conclusions, our opinions in sales ought to be justified by adequate evidence.
What is an example in sales, Michael?
Okay, well, we all know something about customers want, what customers want, but they're different things. So I'm going to give you 3 examples. The first one is a simple one, and I wrote about this in my book. A tourist was in Japan. He's on the last day of a business trip, actually. He was being a tourist on this day. And before the tour bus left, he discovered his camera was dead. The battery was dead. So he's frantically looking around in the gift shop of the hotel, out on the street. Is there a package store nearby he could get a battery? Didn't know what he was going to do. So he went to the front desk and asked the receptionist there, is there some place I can get that sells camera batteries? She says, oh, may I see the camera, please? So he shows her the camera. She goes in the back room, comes back, gives him back the camera, and puts exactly the funny little shaped battery required for that camera on the counter. And he's ecstatic. Wow, what a surprise. That's great, thank you. What do I owe you? Oh, nothing. You're kidding. Wow, oh, thank you so much. You saved my day. And he starts to leave and stops, and he says, this is odd. How could this happen? Ma'am, why do you have camera batteries that you give to hotel guests? I've never been in a hotel that did that. And she said, well, it's a standard policy in our hotel that we don't want to say no to customers. So all employees are required to write down every time they have to say no to a customer. And every Saturday, that information is collected so you can see what they were doing. They were doing a Pareto chart of all the times, and they're figuring out which ones of those could they do something about. And in a weekly cycle, right, they were knocking out those reasons that they had to say no. So it's simpler than a B2B example. We'll have some more complicated examples in a moment, but it's how you integrate diverse data that people in the hotel didn't even know they had, and that data enabled them to make customers unreasonably happy.
Sure. Michael, Totally agree. This case shows us how important it is to systematically collect customer feedback, involve all collaborators in order to be able to apply the PDCA circle in a widespread way. It's right for you?
Yes, absolutely. And so there's a second wrinkle or angle or way to think about this blind man and the elephant. We all know things in different ways. So my example here is a company that made medical equipment. They made respirators where if you're critically ill in the hospital and you can't breathe, they put the mask over your mouth and the machine breathes for you. Now, they wanted to increase their forecast accuracy. It was terrible, in the 30%, 35% range of forecast accuracy. So they decided to try to eliminate salespeople's guesswork. When they hint in their forecast, they say, I think this deal is about 80% chance of close. And instead, they developed a list of observable characteristics of their customers that made them more or less likely to buy. And they put them in ranked order. This allowed them to make observations. In a factory, you would call this a check sheet, but it allowed them to identify what was this particular prospect most like, what did it most resemble in these standards they created, and then convert it into a number. First thing that happened when they began using that check sheet, forecast accuracy jumped. It was around 85%. This was a shock. They didn't expect that to happen. I expected it to happen, but they did. And some other things happened. Some of the questions, the data was showing that our theory about what would make the customer more likely to buy was wrong. So example, in professional selling, there's the idea of a coach or a sponsor. It's a relationship you develop with someone inside the customer's business who wins if you win and who can help you win. And professional salespeople are taught to pay attention to that and develop as many of those as they can. When we went around to look at the data that came back, the coaching question, a lower score actually showed that they were more likely to win the business. So this puzzled us for a while. But since we had the data, we were able to go back and talk to salespeople about how they scored individual opportunities. And almost right away, within 5 or 6 interviews, the pattern was clear. The company had made it a policy to hire professional respiratory therapists, clinicians, right? Technical people, and put them in these sales roles. To those kind of people, the word coach didn't mean what it meant to a professionally trained salesperson. It meant the people I used to work with back when I was managing a department. Okay? And because of that misinformation, that misinterpretation, they were answering the questions in a way that gave us what we got, right? Something that didn't make sense. So there was about 3 questions out of maybe 13 that were statistically significant. And about 3 of them varied inversely. When we got those corrected and improved the check sheet, they were at 95% forecast accuracy. So sales forecasts are unreliable because of inconsistency in how people think. The blind man and the elephant idea helps us realize that we need to carefully develop collective and consistent understandings of what are we observing, what does it mean, that is, what should we do, and then what happens when we actually do this. You can't assume everybody understands those kinds of things in exactly the same way. They don't. You need an explicit method for using language to understand things. And that's why gathering and using feedback is so important in sales. We're so used to working in this invisible, intangible world, we forget we really can't see this stuff. Right? We are like the blind man and the elephant.
Yeah. And Michael, can you provide an example of how the idea of blind man and the elephant help the sales organization forecast more accurately, please?
Sure. Another example, in sales, going to the Gemba means identifying standards, the specific observable facts about prospects that make them more or less of an ideal fit. So this last story here is one of a company that had been attempting for many years, almost 10 years, I think, to penetrate a strategic market, and they were not succeeding. Sales productivity and forecast accuracy were just terrible. The chart that's showing up there, the first three phases of that chart are the years 2016 to 2018. And you can see the variation in revenues per month is pretty dramatic. So they're forecasting something every month, but they didn't get all those deals. So it was really a difficult situation. And in 2018, they basically started from scratch. Which part of this market was more valuable than the others? Who were the particular customers in that market? What did they want? Voice of customer, right? And they developed standards around the ideal customer characteristics that could help salespeople to prioritize more consistently. They actually developed a whole sales process. But in early 2019, it's those observable standards that they use to prioritize where salespeople focus their time. And you can see the result. In the first 6 months of 2019, using these standards, the variation in revenue month to month declined more than 50%. Right? That's a huge increase in forecast accuracy. And the average revenue per month went up almost 40%.
Yes, that connects very well with our experience as well in Italy. Talking about standard in sales is always very difficult. Also for you, Michael.
Yeah. Well, it is because, frankly, most sales departments and salespeople are unfamiliar with this part of the lean culture. You think about how sales training and CRM systems are typically done. It's injected from outside the company, and the salespeople are said, do this. And lean doesn't work that way, right? So you want me to summarize here? I was trying to compare CRM and sales training with, we don't come in from the outside. We work from salespeople on the inside and get them to develop.
Yes, can you give us a summary then of the point of you made now?
Sure. So the point is that sales teams can use evidence and data, and that they can use it to figure out what drives customers. The parable asks people to focus on facts and test them against reality, and so does lean. And salespeople want to do that. They're trying to do it every day. We can help them to collaborate and be smarter about their opportunities by making sure that opinions are justified by observations, by helping them develop shared standards for making conclusions as a group, and then focusing on the customer's perception of value. Those first two, the observations and the shared standards, they get the ball rolling. They're the foundation that enable an organization to really dive in and clarify what's going on within customers and how to influence them. My experience is that it's extremely high forecast accuracy is very doable. And when accuracy improves, then salespeople are wasting less of their time so they can start doing the things that will actually improve results. So wrap it up. Individual observations lead to group observations. That's evidence. And that can be tested and converted into data.
Thanks, Michael. Usually your consideration help us to understand the importance of applying a scientific method also in the sales world. And that doing so can generate many benefits for the company, both in terms of process and people's awareness in perfect style, Staufen style. Michael, finally, before giving space to the question of the participant, I would like to summarize what we have shared today, asking you 3 questions concerning the sales forecast. Is okay for you?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. The first one is it more important to have a shared and structured forecasting process or to have the right data?
It's those two things are, they feed on each other. if you don't have a shared and structured process, you're not going to have the right data, right? When you don't have the right data, you go look at your process to see why. So I would say they're both important, and the data is a product of the process. And when the process isn't working, you get data that tells you that. So they mutually reinforce each other.
Thank you. And how can we understand what is the right data to collect for an accurate forecast?
You've got to start with what your people know, right? What their beliefs are today, and then help them validate it, help them clarify it, articulate it in a measurable, observable kind of a way, and then test it. And they learn a ton when they go through that process, because it fills in each other's blanks, things that they didn't realize. And so, the right data, it starts with what your salespeople believe is data. And then you help them to realize, maybe that's not really data. Maybe I meant this instead of what I was saying before. And incrementally, it gets more and more accurate and better data.
Yes. The last one is, does a data need to be collected systematically, and how should you do it?
Yes. Just as you can't really do manufacturing without using computer technology of some kind, you can't really do selling and marketing without using computer technology of some kind. And this, treating sales as a production system where you want to maximize value and you minimize waste, you need to be able to trace things down to observable things. It needs to be a systematic collection of that information. Now, unfortunately, in the CRM software world, not very many of those systems were built with any insight to what is necessary for process improvement. And that can create some roadblocks. But I will say they're getting better. That I have seen a few systems that are kind of able to do some of these basic things out of the box. So that's a good thing.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. And after share the 3 operational takeaway with the participant, let's move on the question that come to us during this workshop. The first is very interesting and widens the perimeter of our focus. What are the main differences between a lean approach in the sales world and traditional ones?
So I actually wrote an article about this that rather than going the whole thing, I mean, there's one of the key ones is that lean is collaborative. And when you, like sales training, for example, a company comes in, they have good skills, they have good expertise and knowledge, or they wouldn't be a sales training company, they wouldn't have succeeded. But it's about the sales trainers' methods and stuff. And your salespeople are the people who know what their problems are, right? So if there's not a perfect match, then that training isn't going to perfectly stick. And so lean starts from the inside, what's between the salespeople's ears, and it builds out. It's collaborative, as we've said. And I kind of put it into 4 succinct ideas or principles there. So if people want that article, I'm sure we can get it to them.
The second one leads me to ask you if it is correct to understand the concept of value before you understand waste, because the goal is to produce value, not defects. And the question is, how distinguish value from waste in sales?
Yeah, this was a key thing. I puzzled about it for many years. I mean, a long time ago. In manufacturing, waste is whatever the customer wouldn't pay for. But in sales, you don't know what they will or won't pay for by definition, right? And so that it is an important thing. And waste is not the primary concept. Value is. Because value, I mean, waste is the absence of value, right? Something we don't want instead of something we do. So what I realized is that, and every salesperson knows this, you have to get the customer's attention. You have to get his information. You have to earn his trust long before you're ever going to get a chance to earn any of his money. Well, those are actions that he takes or she takes, right, along the customer's journey. And that's how you distinguish value from waste. Everything that you do that helps and facilitates a customer taking the steps you'd like them to take along their customer journey creates value. Everything else is waste.
Good. The last question concerns an important but often not so clearly defined and understood issue. Sales training course usually include qualification criteria. Why aren't these enough?
A great question. And I would say that those qualification criteria are a good place to start. But a sales training company is working in a banking firm 1 week, a manufacturing firm another week, a software company the week after that. They necessarily bring a generalized set of principles. That's not enough for your salespeople. The salespeople have to take what they learned and translate it into something specific for them to make a decision right now in front of this customer. And so salespeople are going to bring their opinions. They're going to bring their best, whatever they've got to it to make the best decisions they can, but they're making judgments. And so rather than generalize on these ideas, like, customer needs a budget, customer needs authority. Yes, they do need those. But what does budget look like in your particular industry? What does authority look like in your particular industry? Salespeople have lots of experiences that probably vary from each other. So spending the time to define it in terms of what they observe in their accounts creates a much richer set of standards that salespeople can identify with, and takes a lot of variation out of them. If you don't do that, then they have no choice but just to do their best guess and use their best opinion.
Thanks, Michael. I would like to add one personal question. In your experience, is simple to map the customer journey into the company, to introduce this approach in the company that you work?
Is it simple? I'd have to say no, because there's so many layers to it.
Yes,
everybody can see that it kind of makes sense, right? But you're really talking about, you can evaluate whether marketing is creating value or not, whether customer service is creating value or not, and whether sales is creating value or not. But you have to rethink it. You have to get all those people on board to see what this looks like to them, and then let them test it. And so it does take time, but man, the improvements that are possible, and it doesn't cost anything. You're just changing the way we think. We're not buying big capital equipment or spending boatloads of money on software or training. We're introducing our critical thinking. And that's where you get competitive advantages, man.
Yeah. Michael, there is another question coming from our participant. Interesting also this. In my experience, Lean is not very popular in sales environments. How to convince sales managers about Lean initiative in their area?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Several different things. If they don't like the word Lean, don't use the word. Call it something else. If you think about why would they react that way? Lots of times they've been introduced to the subject by someone, a plant type person, with all due respect, right? Teaching them Lean by using manufacturing examples. I've heard of horror stories like, the Lean facilitator trying to get salespeople to do 5S on their desk, right? Or the trunk of their car. when a sales guy's got $1 million quota and you're trying to get him to do that, he's going to have a hard time seeing what's the point of this. So we can't be doctrinaire, and lean is not, those tools are valuable, but it's the critical thinking that created those tools, like setup reduction and 5S and, Kanban and all that. We have to take critical thinking into sales. And my experience is when you do that, salespeople are hungry for it.
Yeah.
They're hungry for it, but because you can now have them define the problems and then take the steps to actually solve those problems. And they want that. So I don't have trouble usually when I'm working with sales organizations. Once we get past that initial barrier, they have all these assumptions about what we're talking about, and it might not be true.
And Michael, the lean is also able to integrate sales and marketing departments in your experience?
Absolutely. That's a necessary thing. They need to be, how do you know if it's creating value or not? Have we gotten the customer's attention? How do we know that? Are the customers investigating? Are they spending time? What do they want to know about? When we give them the stuff that they want, we can detect the traction that it's creating and the response that it's creating. But only if marketers and sellers and servicers are held to a common standard, a common goal, just like, purchasing and the departments in a plant are held to a common goal, production goals.
Good. Michael, the questions are finished, and our meeting ends now, and I would like to thank you, first of all, to you for your availability and for the clarity of what has been presented today, like always.
Thank you.
For me.
Thank you.
And thanks to everyone who participated. I think Michael has offered practical insight to all of you. And finally, thanks to those who collaborated for today's events. Ross Kennedy, colleague of Michael, Chiara, our marketing manager, Silvia Mandelli for her support in the development and contents, and Marco for technical support. It will be our care to inform you about the next activities that we will do in partnership with Michael. And finally, you see 2 QR codes on the screen. I ask, please, you to frame the QR code on the left to provide us with your valuable feedback on the event, and to frame the QR code on the right if you would like to receive some articles from Michael on the topics discussed today. The QR code remain visible a few minutes. Thank you again for your participation, and I wish you a good job in lean sales. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Marco.
Bye-bye, Michael.
Bye-bye.
Thank you again for your participation.
Certainly.
Bye. See you.